What's up guys, the Strongboys19 here and welcome to a new album review. Today I'm going to be reviewing the latest album from UK-based thrash metal band Evile, entitled The Unknown. This is their 6th studio album in their discography, making this the follow-up album to 2021's Hell Unleashed. That album was their first album in close to a decade since the release of Skull back in 2013. This album is the second album released through the different record label, that being Napalm Records. Evile has been one of my favourite bands, not only into the modern day era of thrash, but of thrash entirely. They are still as dedicated and as highly passionate as they really want to be. With this record, however, following after the chaotic, brutalized monster that was Hell Unleashed, as I've just said, The Unknown is something different and as a big turning point. And when this album was eventually released, I unfortunately had to see a lot of the negative comments to think that this is like a copy and paste form of what Metallica used to do, something like from the 90s. But what I will say is, just because with your opinion addressed in that way, it makes that criticism at some points invalid, because there were comments on some of their own words that they can judge one song or two and to claim the whole album as like a rip-off of Metallica, which is exactly not the point. When it comes to bands being as open-minded as possible, they can have no apologies to do something like that. Even some of the biggest metal bands of all time, like Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, and Judas Priest, they have done that in their own right. So it kind of drives me insane, to which point that there's barely enough of the open-mindedness to accept it for what it is. Obviously, it's all down to your own personal preference. These experiments may work to you, or these experiments may not work to you. But in my defense, The Unknown is as a very accessible and as a positively productive record. This is an album that focuses less into the fastest of riffs and drumming and everything else from the last album, and shifts along into something slower paced, something very groovy and sludgy. And I do appreciate what Old Drake and company have decided to, for me, accomplish in their own points of view in what they want to create. The Unknown, the title track, the opening song, is a really good opening song. Starts in this really mellow but still pretty dark, sinister vein of expression. And when the song continues, it remains as a catchy piece of music that is one of my favourites. Another highly impressive thing about the album is the sound of the vocals. All's vocals from the last album were really distorted and highly hungry from the chaos and the heaviness, but All this time decides to arrange his voice into more cleaner voices, and throughout a lot of the later elements he has been completely open to sing with a lot of soul and melody, and he does continue to do that throughout some of the other songs on this album later on, but he can still add some more of his grit when the faster tempos and songwriting approaches on this album do deliver later on. But The Unknown, to me, is a really good opening song, full of this catchiness, and the lead guitar work. I just cannot help but to think that he is some of the most precise and cleanest lead guitar soloists that I've ever listened to into this direction of the genre. Always one of my favourite shredders, and the rest of the band are still just as amazing. The Mask We Wear is another really good, strong song, full of the punch, and a lot of the consistency was all here as well. Something similar to what the last track was. But in my opinion, this is another highly enjoyable song with so much of this positivity and the adrenaline to carry on this mid-tempo arrangement. But when it comes to the ballad on here, that is When Mortal Coils Shed, the targeted one for being something like Black Album era Metallica, yes, it is very much similar. Evile are worshippers for Metallica, but you have to understand they do have various influences of other bands as well, as pretty much 99% of the time of other metal bands, they have more than one influence. When Mortal Coils Shed, for me was a very expressive piece, and yes, being the softest piece out of this whole record, the vocals are highly strong on here, and the balance into the dexterity of the skills from the guitar work to changing it up into a gentle, flowing and slow piece. This is, to me, this inspiration that was really presentable. And say what you say about this song, but I really like this one so much. I do not care whatsoever about the similar so-called pedestrian, because it explores this separate craft of emotion and the overall progression of where the band would maybe be going into in a positive way. Then the rest of the album continues forward with some returnings to faster tempos and amazing thrash attacks like Sleepless Eyes, which is another one of the strongest cuts on this album. Sleepless Eyes is maybe a potential one that, in my opinion, is one of my new favourite Evile tracks. Same goes with the next track, Out of Sight. The heavy mentality into these chugging riffs and the admirable, skillful musicianship could not have been just as very dedicating and as amazing to listen to. The drums to the bass and the whole rhythm section throughout these later tracks are so presentable, punchy and as aggressive, and they add their own path and distinction. Another really good track on here is Beginning of the End, full of this tension, these descending passageways on these riffs were really strong, and the more I think about the overall less technicality and more simple but as intriguing sources of where this songwriting had to go to this point, makes it as really interested and enjoyable into another set of great riffs and power into the chorus and phenomenal lead guitar work. And same goes on to the last track, Balance of Time. Just like with Sleepless Eyes, they ended this song in a pulverizing effort in this highly efficient and just as a wild, catastrophic, mad ride. The lineup to this band is, to me, as awesome and really strong. Like with the previous lineup changes, the previous lineup then was spectacular, but when it comes to the changes and the highly acceptable pace of direction, The Unknown as an album for me was really good, and much love to this lineup of the band 100% for sticking to their guns and make something that is nothing like what the band had done previously, because the grooves were there, the thrash was there, the heavy metal inspiration was there, but this is a record with a separate purpose, its own charm, and a big wholesome effort. I will say the Hell Unleashed record is a bit of a favourable record, but for me, Evile have not made a single weak release, and even though The Unknown for me is not like one of the higher ranked albums if I would have ranked their discography, but it's no denying whatsoever for the fact that The Unknown was a record that still impressed me despite the negative criticisms, and with a bit of the repetitive nature on some of the songs that they can really be when I listen to this record. But I've not moved away from what the band wanted to do with this record as a whole. That's personally all I would like to say about The Unknown by Evile. Let me know what you guys think of this record in the comments down below. Do you think differently to what I've been saying all the way through in this review? Or do you like this album? Do you appreciate Evile's attempts into this shifting point? Just address your views in the comments. I'm going to give The Unknown by Evile a very respectable 8 out of 10. Not one of the strongest records of this year, not one of the strongest from the band in its entirety, but I still give a lot of the appreciation for the band to be, I would say, as optimistic and as so passionate as they always have been around this point. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.